Dementia. Today I want to talk about 15 dementia risks. 5 of them are difficult to change, and I'm going to talk about those briefly first, and then there's 10 that you can do something about. So the first one, of course, is genes. A lot of people think that dementia is caused by your genes. Now, for some people that is definitely true, particularly people who have early onset dementia, but for many people it's not the case. It's overestimated. I think people think it's more important than it actually is. The second risk factor, of course, is age. The older you are, the more likely you are to suffer from dementia. And you can't actually change your age. But do remember that there are people in their 80s, in their 90s, who can hold a good conversation with you. There's all sorts of people out there who don't have dementia, even though they're in their 80s and 90s. A third factor is having less education. And though if you're starting out in your life, you can do something about that, for most of us, it's maybe too late to do a lot about it. The researchers don't entirely know why that's the case, but it is part of the risk factors for dementia. Air pollution. Again, we can do something about it, but only as a society. Individually, it's very difficult to do anything about it, but air pollution is on the increase and is becoming more and more of a problem for people, and that is a contributing risk factor for dementia. And the fifth one that's difficult to do anything about, in one way, is traumatic brain injury. Obviously, if you're now in your 30s or 40s and played rugby or had an accident where you had a traumatic brain injury, then you can't change that. Fortunately, now I think people are much more aware of the problems, and certainly in games like rugby and some other sports, more attention is being paid to avoiding head injuries. So those are the first 5 factors that you're completely unable to fix or change, like your age and your genes. And there's others that, in practical terms, aren't modifiable, like having less education, like air pollution, and like traumatic brain injury. But now I want to talk about the 10 factors you can influence. These are in no particular order. Which ones are important for you may be completely different to which ones that are important for someone else. The order doesn't indicate which is most important. So the first one is alcohol. The higher your alcohol intake is, the more likely you are to get dementia. And we're not talking about alcoholics here. We're talking about people that maybe we would call heavy drinkers, or people who just every night drink quite a lot. A lot of people use drink for social situations, when they're stressed, to relax, or even to help them go to sleep. Now, if you're someone who uses alcohol to help you go to sleep, you're probably convinced that it's a really good thing to do because it helps you get to sleep, and we all know that sleep is important. But, and there's a really, really big but, research shows you may get to sleep, but the quality of your sleep is less. And the research shows that actually the quality being worse outweighs the benefit of actually having more sleep. The other big problem with alcohol, of course, is that over time you need more and more alcohol to get that same relaxing sleeping effect. And that's potentially a dangerous path to be on. So try and find some other ways to get to sleep. I've got a video on that, 9 sleep tips. There's a link in the description of this video. We don't entirely know why hearing loss is a problem. If people have hearing aids, that completely counteracts the problem with hearing loss. It's thought to be, but we don't know for certain, but it's thought to be that if people can't hear properly, then they may avoid social situations, or if they're in social situations, maybe they start to drift off because it's too difficult to follow the conversation. So they stop taking part because they're having difficulty following it. And so then they're not interacting with other people. They're not being stimulated by conversation. Seems it may well be something to do with the brain not getting that level of stimulation. So having a hearing aid, if you've got hearing loss, that really counters that. The eighth factor, and the third of the preventable ones, is tooth loss. Now, if you've got tooth loss, you may say, well, there's not much I can do about this. I can't get my teeth back. But tooth loss has been shown to be linked with dementia. And the more teeth you've lost, the more likely you are to suffer with dementia. But if people start to wear dentures, then that completely counteracts the effect of the tooth loss. So potentially it is something you can do something about. So if you've still got your teeth, look after them really well, because it will help prevent dementia. And if you've lost teeth, then you really need to find and get fitted with some comfortable dentures. The ninth risk factor is diabetes. If you have diabetes, you're much more likely to get dementia. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes I'm talking about here, is preventable if you make the right changes to your diet, to your weight and everything else. Plant-based diets have been found to be particularly beneficial for people with diabetes, so do look into that. There's lots of information about that on YouTube or on the internet generally. Number 10 is hypertension, high blood pressure. High blood pressure is linked with dementia. If you have high blood pressure, there can be various reasons for that. Stress can cause you to have high blood pressure. One of the things about high blood pressure is most people aren't aware of it unless their blood pressure is taken. So as you get older, it's a good idea to take your blood pressure regularly, or get somebody medical to take your blood pressure regularly for you, and so that you can keep an eye on it and see if you're starting to have problems. But the preventive stuff is to reduce your stress, reduce the salt in your diet, and reduce your weight if you're overweight. And that brings us to the 11th risk factor, which is obesity, being overweight. Now, it's really easy to say that getting your weight off will help prevent dementia and all sorts of other problems. But that's easier said than done, isn't it? I know for many people it's really difficult. I've written a book called 190 Weight Loss Hacks, which give you lots of practical strategies, changes in your mindset, and things you can do to help you lose weight. And they're all backed up by research. So it's not my opinion that this works, it's what the research says that works. There's a link to the book in the video description. You can buy it on Amazon, and it's also available as an audiobook on Amazon and Audible. Smoking. Smoking is not good for you for all sorts of reasons. So it's really important to think about giving up, because it increases your chance of getting dementia along with everything else. Now, all the research seems to suggest that people are likely to be more successful if they join a group. It can be face-to-face, it can be online, or have counselling or something else. People who try to go it on their own, on the whole, are less successful. Now, there are people who successfully give up smoking without any outsider help. I did that, and I used to smoke 40 to 50 cigarettes a day, so I know it can be done. But for most people, you're more likely to succeed if you have some sort of support. Depression, number 13. If you're depressed, then you're more likely to get dementia. That's a depressing thought in itself, isn't it? I'm not going to tell you if you're depressed, just snap out of it or think about all the good things in your life. Many years ago, I suffered with depression and ended up on tranquilizers and antidepressants. And I know all those well-meaning bits of advice actually don't work. If you're depressed, then seek help. There is help. There are people who can help you. Maybe it's a counsellor. Maybe it's joining a running group or doing something like that. Some people find exercise really helps counter depression. But it's really important so that you can enjoy life more and so that you reduce your chances of suffering from dementia. Lack of physical activity. I can hear people groaning. There's so many people who don't want to do any physical activity. But physical activity is really important for your health for all sorts of reasons, one of which is reducing your risk of getting dementia. Now, I've said physical activity because you don't necessarily need to do a sport or go and do fitness. You just need to move more physically. There's some interesting research, and there's a link to this research and all the other research in the video description, that showed that 3,800 steps a day reduces your chances of dementia by 25%. 25%, it's a lot. And 3,800 steps a day? That's not actually such a lot. For most people, in most circumstances, it is doable. So if it's doable for you, think about it. Can you do this? If you do more than that, there's more benefit attached. I've done a video on how many steps you should take a day, and you'll see if you do 3,800, 25% reduction in dementia. The more you do, the more benefit you get. But also, in terms of physical activity, you can also do something that's called exercise snacking. I've recommended this to quite a few friends, and they've always got quite excited at the idea. So exercise snacking is doing little bits of exercise through the day. So, for example, while the kettle's boiling, you run up and down the stairs. As you're emptying the dishwasher, between each moving the dishes out, you do some air squats. When you come in with shopping, maybe you do 10 laps of the kitchen before you put the shopping away. So the idea is that throughout the day, you just sprinkle little bits of activity around that will benefit your overall health. And that, for a lot of people, is much more doable. Ideally, you want to be doing a lot more, but if you're not doing anything, that's a really, really good place to start. And the 15th and final factor is social isolation, being lonely. It's really hard. I know, particularly as people get older, it can be hard because their partner may die, children move away, friends die. So you can start to feel really, really isolated. And, you know, the common response is join a social group. And that's one of those trite things that people say, but it actually does work. So go and join a social group. At these social groups, there will be other people like you who want to make new friends. So there's 15 risk factors for dementia. Number 1, genes. Number 2, your age. Number 3, not having a lot of education. Number 4, traumatic brain injury. Number 5, air pollution. Those are difficult to change. And then the 10 modifiable ones are alcohol, hearing loss, tooth loss, diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, being overweight, smoking, depression, lack of physical activity, and social isolation. Don't try and tackle everything at once. Find the thing that you would think would be easiest for you to change. Whatever that is, just do it. Just start. Today, preferably. Just start doing it. You don't want to get dementia. It's very stressful for you and for your loved ones, the people who care about you, your friends. Dementia isn't inevitable. That's the most important thing to remember. There are things you can do to change the situation. Even if you do all these, we can't guarantee you won't get dementia, but you will reduce your chances of getting dementia massively if you make these lifestyle changes.